Have you achieved success and a high income, but still lack personal fulfillment and work-life balance? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Successful But Struggling podcast. Join us as Erin, Eunicia, Joanne, and Mim share transformative insights and practical strategies just for you. Discover real stories and lessons that will elevate your personal satisfaction, professional accomplishment, and financial empowerment.
Welcome back to the Successful But Struggling podcast. I'm Mim Abbey, and I'm here with Dr. Joanne Sotelo. And we're in the second part of our 4-part masterclass on how to maintain and increase your success, but to do it with a lot less struggle. And in our episode today, Joanne is going to talk about the psychiatrist's 3 strategies to prevent burnout. Now, Joanne, you're a psychiatrist. Tell us about burnout. We're hearing more and more about mental health these days and the need to prioritize it. Tell us from your experience or from what you know, why is it so important that we really prioritize this conversation? Why is mental health such an important area for us to focus on?
Thank you, Mim. And it's so important. I'm so glad that we're here, the 4 of us, and able to bring conversations that maybe are not as easy to have and as experts, right? It's our responsibility and our joy also to be able to share this information. And I've been a psychiatrist for more than 20 years. This is my passion. And I've always thought it's so important to bring prevention and awareness. So sometimes we need to hear the statistics just to wake us up as well. So I'll tell you a few. The first one is, according to the National Alliance of Mental Illness, 1 out of 5 individuals struggle with mental illness throughout their lives, right? So if we think for ourselves or even our family members, our friends, maybe one of us, maybe even yourself, you struggled with some depression or anxiety or kind of a complicated grief, right? It's such a wide spectrum of difficulties that we struggle, but it is way more common than what we think. It's almost easier to talk about heart problems or even cancer, but right, like it's mental health, and that's what we know, right? A lot of people don't say it out loud, right? Which is the other important point in terms of suffering in silence. The second point that it's so important, according to the World Health Organization, is that mental illness is the main cause of disability, with depression being the first. So imagine a lot of times we dismiss these problems, but right, like a lot of these mental disorders, again, if we think of depression, they can be severe enough to the point that they interfere with your functioning, your day to day, and your ability to hold a job, right? So it's huge. And related to that, it's our third point that it costs $1 trillion in the United States in loss of productivity. So you can think about it, if you're an entrepreneur, if you hold a business, right? Or if you just, even if you work for an institution and right, like I know one of my friends who's a physician and their main nurse, unfortunately is in disability right now, right? So it affects us all, even if you're not the one um, affected by it directly. A fourth statistic that, right, like it's even more important to talk about, it's mental illness starts when we are young, with half of them starting by age 14 and 2/3 by age 24. So you can imagine like, right, like think of our kids, or right, our nephews and nieces, and a lot of times we see them struggling. It might even show up a little bit different, so we need to pay attention. And sometimes we minimize it with love, like, oh, don't worry, hon, it's going to be okay, but we need to pay attention and seek help if needed. And then the fifth one that I'm going to share, which is part of my mission and part why I'm here, and that we, sharing all of this, is 2/3 of these individuals, right? Like we already shared the high number, never seek help. And a sad part is that a lot of times they don't seek help still because of stigma, lack of access, and discrimination. And that has to change, right? It's part of why we're here, because we, right, and that we need to talk about it, something we can't ignore.
Joanne, those stats are absolutely staggering. 1 out of 5. I mean, you think you know 5 people. Everyone knows 5 people. You know more than 5. You know 10. You know, and to like add that up, that is incredible. So many people struggle. And then that second one really got me that according to the WHO, that the leading cause of disability is is mental health. Like that's incredible. You when we think about sickness, when we think about illness, we all picture something visual, something that you can see, or something that's going to cause somebody to be in a hospital bed because of again something like more obviously physical, but that is the leading cause of disability. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Yes, yes, my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
And it's chronic, right? Chronic meaning that it, it's lifelong and it comes and goes and it's difficult to predict, right? So important.
Yeah, and it being chronic like that, that is it's not just a I feel bad today and tomorrow I feel better. It's you're talking about something that is going to absolutely derail your life and a heartbreaking that for half of people who suffer from this, it starts by 14. Incredible. So I love that you're on a mission and it's clearly such an important mission because as you say, most people, two-thirds never seek the help that
Hmm.
they need because of that lack of access or because of that stigma. And I know that's turning around. The stigma is starting to turn around, but we know it's still there. So we started by talking about burnout. I know that you have 3 great strategies for us, and I imagine that the idea here is that mental health is serious, serious business, and that burnout is the start. And if you allow yourself to just burn out, but I can gut through, not a good idea. It can lead somewhere that you really don't want to go. And I'd love to hear more about that. Gosh, I'd love to hear your advice and your strategies.
Yes, and if we bring it back to us, right, and we think of what we're here for, right, like we're successful and we struggle, we are all at risk for burnout, right? It's not I'm not burned out, or no, 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 I have tools. We are all in that spectrum. So it's so important to be aware of where we are, right? So that I always say, even before I go to my 3 steps, I always say awareness and clarity always need to come before anything else, right? So I say, let's check in, let's take our pulse. Where are you? How are you feeling? Right? Like what's going on? What's getting in the way, right? Like those assessments that we'll get back to talking about in more detail, but checking in with awareness and vulnerability and honesty, because we're all there. It's part of what we do. And more than half of professionals, period, suffer symptoms of burnout. So it's again something that we cannot ignore. And it's something that we can work on, that we can prevent. And it might also prevent dealing then with more things like depression, anxiety, even alcohol abuse, right? So it's an important conversation, even in that spectrum as well. So I'll go ahead and start.
Yeah.
So the first one, and listen, because I can raise my hand in all of them. So pay attention and see, that sounds a little familiar, and think of how is it showing up
Mm.
in your life. So the first one, my friends, we have to stop neglecting our self care. And I know that we talk a lot about this in personal development, right? Like self care is not selfish and all the things, but we have to take this seriously. If you want to show up for others, you have to take accountability for your own well being. When people ask me, "Oh, Joanne, you're a psychiatrist and you're a coach, tell us the magic potion." And there's no magic potion. It's this. And what I'm going to say you might not like, but it's super important. We have to get back to basics, right? So, what are the basics? Sleep, my friends. What are we eating? Um, uh, what, like, are you, drinking enough water? Do you have supplements? And then some of the mindset tools that we'll be talking a lot about, like journaling, breathing, meditation, whatever is your favorite flavor there. And I'm going to give you a key one that we don't always think of. When we think of consumption, we have to think of what we're consuming, not just food related, but then also what's in your social media. How much are you in a comparison? And also who is around you, right? Like we talk about, we are the combination of the five people around you. And you can love someone and then also need a little bit of protection from, right, like energy wise. So it's something that I feel very passionate about. So again, number one, we need to focus our well-being.
Wow. Joanne, I love the very first thing you said about that, which was if we're going to show up for others. We don't think about that. We just think, oh, I have to show up for others. But putting that if in front of it, if we're going to show up for others, we have to take accountability for our self-care. And I like your choice of words. It's being accountable. And that account we have to be accountable to ourselves because ultimately we are accountable to others. And if we go to that burnout place, we're we're going to be no good to anyone else. So I so agree with that. Okay, when you said consumption and you said not only what we're bringing into our bodies, but social media, and the very first thing you said was comparison. I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear more about that. You went right to that, and I'm assuming that as a psychiatrist, you see
Mhm.
that there's a big link between social media and comparison.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. We could have we should put it in our list of topics of just comparison and what it does to our brain. So to bring it up briefly, when we compare ourselves, it's rare that your brain is doing it in your favor, unless you have an very healthy, overly healthy ego that you believe that you're better for than other people, which is healthy sometimes, right? Like we have to learn to pat ourselves in the back. But most of us, even when we feel good in our sense of self, when we compare, it's usually not in our favor. And part of it, it's a survival instinct, right? If we take our brain to thousands and thousands years ago, and there's people in the cave next to yours that looked healthier and a little bit bigger, and they seem like they have a bigger fire and more food, you want to know that that comparison is healthy because it can serve you in survival. But now it's social media, right? And we can talk so much about it when we're swiping, and it's constantly it's so much, we have no idea how much we're putting in our brain, and we see everyone's really pretty reels and pictures, and it will pay attention usually to the parts of us that we feel are a little lacking, right? Like if you're trying to lose weight, maybe you'll pay attention to someone who looks really good in a bathing suit, or if you're looking for relationships or in the middle of a breakup, you might see the pictures of people together and be like, oh, I wish I was that happy, or I wish I had that car, or I wish I was traveling, right? So it's usually not in our favor. So we have to think about it like that. And I'm always talking about mental and emotional energy. And those are inner energetic drains. Not that social media is a bad thing, but we have to be very careful because it's usually, again, it'll probably get you in the negative. And you've probably noticed it, that times when you're scrolling and then you're done and then you just don't feel that good about yourself, right? So kind of checking in to see what that's doing. I clean my social media all the time. Be like, what can I stop liking, or right? And I'll sit down and compare my social media to my kids and see what's Instagram feeding you that you didn't give them permission for, based on what you've liked and where you've paused. So anyway, I think that's an episode all in its own because it's so important. But thank you for asking.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I think it is. I'd love to come back to that and some specific things that I'm looking forward to hearing the psychiatrist recommendation about how to scrub and how to scrub more. So fantastic. Gosh, thank you so much. I know that you've got two more, Joanne. I want to hear them. How do we prevent burnout?
Yes, yes, yes. Right. I can go in full tangents. So let's bring us back. So the
So
second
good.
one, then again, we can all raise our hands, is we need to stop saying yes to everything.
Mm,
Again, as professional, and a lot of us are, right, like professional women, and we're like, I'm strong, I'm independent, I'm smart. We end up in saying yes to a lot of things, and part of it is because it feels good. I love being
mhm.
asked to do things, and it's sometimes that decision that's in front of you. And we need, the key word here is boundaries. boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. It's something that we don't talk enough about. We don't learn about it. We're actually programmed to think that if we say no, it's a bad thing, right? Especially for us women. And we don't have real good role models. So we have to learn to filter those decisions and to know what's the cost. Because it might be a good idea, but if that good idea keeps you from something else, it might not be good in the long run, right? So what's that invisible cost, right? If I say yes to this, is will that mean that I won't be able to go to my kids' lacrosse game, right? Or out of right, like will it sacrifice me exercising when we just talked about number one being self-care, or just downtime to think about life and checking in, right? So it's super super important. So and we can go deep in this conversation, but we also have to think of, why is it difficult to say no? What does it mean to us, right? So those are good questions to ask ourselves, and even think of the last thing that you said yes to, and then you're like, why did I say yes to this? I really don't want to do this. Or right, like, or it was more draining than you thought, or it didn't give you the return that you were looking for. So and another good point, and I'll bring my friend Dr. Sasha Shillcutt to the conversation, because she wrote a book on boundaries. And two things that she talks about that I repeat a lot when I'm coaching and with my psychiatry patients is, when we set boundaries, we have to assume that part of the game is that we're going to feel guilty, especially for those of us who are a little bit of people pleasers, right? And that there's going to be backlash, because people might not be used to you setting boundaries. So if that happens, be careful, don't undo it. It might be actually the sign that you are doing it well. And something that I like to think of, right? It's boundaries are not meant to push people and things outside, is to protect yourself, right? It's not an electric fence. It's actually more of this glow of energy to protect yourself, so that you can show up for what you really want to show up for, and keep you in alignment with your priorities and your values.
Mm. That's I love that you finished with that, Joanne, and I'm gonna picture that protective, that glowing, that sort of light. I've got this healthy boundary around myself, and that it's not a pushing people away. And I would go back to how you started, even the first one of, if I am gonna show up for others, I well for others, ultimately I have to have those boundaries. So you just said prioritizing. So would you just say a little bit more about that, about how you recommend people think through their priorities, especially when there's competing really important priorities, or there's
Mm.
values, or how to, when there's two good things and which one do I choose?
Oh my goodness, my brain is spinning of like, oh, more and more episodes that we can do, because and I love, and this is actually when I'm coaching, I have a session just about values,
Mm,
so that we can set up our priorities.
mm,
And also with the awareness that values change, right? Like, now that I'm older, my kids are older, I have one in college, and my other one, he's super independent, right? Like, of course, family, it's always top of the list, but how I need to show up, it's different. And I can prioritize this bigger mission of showing up in here and in coaching, which I probably could have not done 5 years ago. And that's okay, right? So we need to review our values with honesty, and check in every so often. And then from there, we set our priorities, because it's and priorities actually shouldn't even be in plural. It kind of defeats the purpose of the definition of the word. It needs to be like a main thing. Of course, we want it to be several things, right? So um and it could be general, or it could be very specific, but it's what's going to keep you aligned, right? So a general recommendation would be to, I don't know, think of five, six, seven things that you want to accomplish. And then review it. What's the one thing that you would want to work on the most? Either because it's faster and easier and it'll give you fast results, or it'll give you the biggest ripple effect, right? For a lot of us, number one is health. because if we're not healthy, nothing else matters, right? And I know, okay, if I'm healthy or if I'm sleeping well, if I'm eating well, I show up better. Therefore, my second and third priority, it's easier for me, right? So think about it like that, and it's okay that it changes, and it's okay if family is not your number one at this point, right? Like there's no judgment, right? Only self compassion here, but it's so good, and we know we all follow Brendan Bouchard, and he does such a good job of like competing interests, and a lot of times it's two good things that we want to work on, but we need to decide what we want to work on first, because if not, we're going to feel like we're lacking or in deficit all the time. For example, a lot of the doctors I work with, right, like they want to finish their job faster, be more efficient, and leave most of it done by the end of the day. And they want to get home early to cook and go to the kids' soccer practice. And more important, not just show up with time, but show up with presence and energy and not cranky. And it those two things might not happen at once, right? It could be that we need to make the decision intentionally to leave some work undone, but instead of making ourselves feel like we're not good enough, we're going to say no, this is on purpose because right now it's Tuesday and my kids have practice at 5:30, so on Tuesdays and Thursdays I'm going to leave work a little bit earlier so I can check in with presence for my family, right? So again, that's kind of a general example, but it's such an important thing to think of, because a lot of times, again, when we're successful but we're struggling, usually that is a problem. Like we just have a lot of important things in our plate that can be competing for our attention and our energy.
Yep. Wow. Joanne, so many good things. And you mentioned the word presence several times. I think that is so important. And the things you're talking around, you've mentioned the word clarity. Before you were talking about values. And this one you just said to make a decision. And then what you said just made my skin crawl, to leave some work undone. We've got this work to do. And there's that urge to, like, of course I've got to finish this. But the question is, do you really? You're midstream on it, but it's what time is it? And yep, there's that really important thing. There's a kid's game or something that was a higher priority. And to make the decision to stop and leave something, quote, undone purposefully and shift gears. But that does take that setting those boundaries. That does take the prioritizing and the values and the clarity and all of that. So it is so, so good, Joanne. Yeah. Thank you so much. I know that we've got a third one that
Yeah.
we haven't gotten to hear. We heard about self-care. We've talked about boundaries. What else do we need to do to prevent burnout? And then the successive things after that, if it keeps going, that could happen that we want to avoid.
Yes, a lot of times when we're successful and we start to struggle, one thing that we have to pay attention to is that we need to stop the lone ranger mentality and
Mm,
ask the question. The right question is not, can I do it by myself? Is then asking, is that really the best thing? And like, I know I could probably raise the hand of like the tallest for this one. It's like, no, 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 I can do it. And it's not like an ego thing. It's more like, I don't want to bother anyone. I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to delegate. Right. And sometimes that is the right thing to do. And it's so, so, so important to have community. So ask yourself, who's in your tribe, right? Like I feel so lucky to have you all four in here with me, in this amazing audience, right? Like who's your tribe? Who's your community? Who is that person that you can ask for help, lean on? And it might be different people. You can have someone at work that can help you, if you're falling behind. You can have someone to help you at home. You can have someone that you call to celebrate with you, or someone to call when you're feeling sad or anxious. But it's super important for us to have our tribe and our community, because that's how we grow. That's how we move forward. That's how we get stronger, right? Like what's the saying? I might say it wrong, right? Like we might go faster by ourselves, but we'll go farther with others, right? So that's part of our message here. So focus on personal relationships, and think about it too. Who is it? Who's important to you that you might need to be paying more attention to, right? Like the other side of the coin of relationships too, of where we need to show up better for someone else. So, I love what we do here together because, right, like it's I know I can count on all of you, and it's such a beautiful gift in life, especially for those of us who are a little bit older, right? Like they say, it's hard to make friendships when you're older. It's
Mhm.
like, well, no, that's not true. You just have to work on it a little bit and show up with intention and presence. But it's so, so, so important that I forget that. Like, no, 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 I'm fine. I don't need help. And then,
Mm.
like you said, is that the truth? Like, really? I'm like, well, maybe I need a little bit of help
Mhm.
here, even if it's just to vent, and
Mhm.
it's kind of a beautiful
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, sometimes it's support, sometimes it's moral support. Absolutely, and just knowing that, like you said, who's your tribe, who's in your corner, who's in your foxhole, just knowing that someone's there just can buoy you up on during those times that is really hard. What would you say, what's just coming to me, Joanne, is since the second point was about stop saying yes to everything and setting up boundaries, and then the third piece is about stopping that Lone Ranger thing. So we want to really seek and build and community. Where do you see the balance between the two of those? Because what we don't want to be in community where there's no boundaries. So we want a really
Hmm.
healthy community. What advice would you give to someone who's looking to build their community and feels like the only way I can build my community is by saying yes to everything or to everyone or requests that come up? What comes to mind for you when you think, gosh, it's like it's not what I guess what I'm thinking about is it's not one or the other. It seems like a
Yes,
lot of
yes.
people may. Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, and community doesn't mean that then we're just gonna be extra nice to all the people all the time and free for all. I know it
Yeah,
sounds weird to say that out loud, but right, like it's sometimes the right thing to do is to say no and protect your
yeah,
your space and protect your energy that you want to save for other things. Again, going back to your previous question of you're saving it for your priorities and your values and what's
yeah.
important to you in this moment. So and it's the key here too is communication,
Hmm.
right? Like it's communicating what you need and who's right to the people in your life and building that community. But then also sometimes even with the people closest to you, it's the people that you need to set the clearest of boundaries and communicate them, even though those might be the hardest, right? So that's a really good question. It's making me think, right? Because it's sometimes we confuse community and connection with just saying yes. And that sometimes I appreciate a no. If you don't, if don't tell me yes, if you really want to say no, right? Like I'll appreciate it on the other side. And I hope that that's true if that's kind of what I have to say, even though it's hard. It's really it's one thing that I like to talk about because it's one thing I've worked on really, really hard. And it's actually a work on progress. Something that you need to keep on evaluating and resetting. And again, communication, open and honest communication. Not doesn't need to be rude. It if you like I say, if you come from your heart and love, it's always going to be lighter and better.
Yeah.
So that's a good kind of a good general statement here.
I like that. I really like that, Joanne. Yeah, because what I hear when you couple those things to like these things aren't mutually exclusive. You got self care and you have boundaries and you're going to build community and you can do all these things. And what the word that came to mind for me is you were just describing community doesn't mean you have to say yes to everything. It's like genuine community. And I think you said the magic word, which is communication. It's let's really build real relationships and strong relationships. And there's a time that there's a well-placed no. No question about it. Yeah. So good. So good. I know I feel the same way. I'm so grateful for this community. So grateful for if you're here listening, for you being here. I'm grateful for my partners in successful but struggling. As we wrap this up, Joanne, this has been such an important conversation. Goodness, that mental health conversation and all those really very sad statistics and being sure that we address burnout we prevent burnout. We nip this stuff in the bud so that we don't get to those later negative stages that we don't want to be at. We don't want to be in that situation. And so this has been such a conversation, such an important conversation about prioritizing mental health. Joanne, just as we wrap up, any final anything that you want to share with our people who are here with us today?
Mhm. Yes, no, it's again going back to these are sometimes difficult conversations to have. And it's super important to, in taking it back to the mental health, to kind of giving ourselves permission that it's okay to not be okay sometimes. And that doesn't mean that we're gonna crash down and stay down. And those are the times to ask for help. Those are the times to do all the things to get to your self care, to say no, really protect your energy, and to ask for help, and really tap into your community. So we can bring it back to, all the important things for our overall well being.
Yeah, wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Joanne Sotelo, for sharing with us. And this is a quick reminder is that this is part two. We're just wrapping up part two of our 4-part masterclass. And what that means is we are bringing the four of us in the Successful But Struggling podcast are bringing you our top recommendations for how to be more successful, keep the success you have. You're already successful, and then just to keep that going, but to just dial down the struggle. And you've heard from Joanne today in our second session. Stay tuned and tune in next time when we get to our third session, where we're going to be talking about financial wellness. Very excited about that piece. And then we'll get to our fourth piece. And so come on back. We're looking forward to seeing you next time. And so glad you were here today. Joanne, thank you so much. And everyone, we'll see you next time.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Don't miss out on more strategies that will elevate you to new heights. Visit successfulbutstruggling.com now, where you'll discover exclusive resources and the opportunity to connect with each of us individually. There you can dive deeper into how you, too, can take your personal and professional game to the next level. And if you're serious about optimizing your results, take 2 quick steps now. Number 1, connect with us on the website. And number 2, tune in to the next episode.